With me today, we have some great guests. First of all, we have Gretchen Effgen. Gretchen is VP of Global Partnerships for the Hyundai Aptiv Autonomous Driving Joint Venture, where she leads the company's go-to-market team in developing and executing the strategy and partnerships required to bring autonomous vehicles to market. Previously, Gretchen served as a Zipcar executive, where she was responsible for the company's strategic partnerships, including those with Honda and Toyota. Thank you for joining us, Gretchen. Second, we have Dave Agnew, VP of Business Development for Dataspeed, where he is expanding their business in autonomous vehicle technology. David is a developer of autonomous and active safety systems, previously leading advanced engineering groups for both Continental Automotive and Hyundai Mobis North America. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks.
And last, we have Chau, Head of Marketing for Lyft's autonomous vehicles and enterprise businesses. Previously, she spent 7 years at Facebook and has spent over 15 years educating consumers and businesses about complex products and services, such as facial recognition, privacy and data, applications of AI, location sharing, mapping, internet infrastructure, and now AVs. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. We received a lot of great questions from people as they registered that we're going to weave into our questions in our discussion. But we'll also be accepting them live throughout the panel, so feel free to keep sending them in through the Q&A, and we'll address them as time permits. Great, so I want to start off by having each of the panelists give the audience a sense of where and how their company interacts with riders, particularly first-time riders. So Grace, could you start us off with a brief introduction to Lyft's interaction with first-time riders? What kind of vehicles do they ride in? Where are they taking those rides and things like that?
Sure, thanks, Tabitha. A little bit of context first on Lyft's AV work and specifically how consumers are exposed to self-driving rides. Lyft's mission is to improve people's lives with the world's best transportation, and we believe autonomous vehicles are a really key part of that future, and that collaboration is key. So Lyft has a two-pronged approach to AV, first developing our own self-driving technology in-house, which started in 2017, and partnering deeply with other leading self-driving companies, such as Aptiv here, hello Gretchen, to bring self-driving rides to market, where we are currently in Las Vegas as well as in Phoenix. So in terms of the user experience, consumers can basically open their Lyft app and they can opt in to see a self-driving ride if it's available where they are, and then choose it, and then it arrives and they hop in. And we have a range of ways to get feedback from consumers, or for ways for consumers to share feedback about their experience with us.
Great. David, same question to you. How does Dataspeed interact with first-time riders, and what is that context like?
Okay, sure, thanks. So Dataspeed, for a little context again, we're engineering autonomous technology, not so much for consumers. We don't interact with the public. We're a business to business. So we're doing autonomous technology for other companies to use. So the way we got involved with doing rider experiences is we were actually approached by PAVE, by SAE under their demo days program last year to do an event in April in Detroit. And that ended up being a 7-day event that was open to the public. And the reason it fit well for Dataspeed was we didn't just give rides, we actually kind of created a ride experience for first-time riders to learn about autonomous. So it wasn't just riding around, and it was actually an indoor event. It was inside the Cobo Hall, the conference center in Detroit. They gave us an entire hall to do the event in. We went up to about 20 miles an hour. We had multiple vehicles on the track with interactions, objects that we were avoiding. We included teleoperation to give people that experience. And it ended up being about 6-minute rides per run. And we went from morning till night, 7 days in a row, and ended up giving 1,200 rides in that time frame. So it was really an intense experience. It was really an interesting experience. And the audience that we had coming through it was the first 3 days through PAVE was it was open to the public, and it had been advertised that this event was going to happen, so people had to sign up. So these were all people very interested. And then the last 3-4 days was SAE's event, which was the automotive industry's World Congress. So it was an interesting mix. We also had press people going through it, and we had government people coming through it and accessibility groups. So it's really interesting event.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. And then finally over to you, Gretchen. Could you tell me a little bit about Aptiv and the work that you all do with first-time riders?
Sure, absolutely. So our interactions with riders comes through a couple of different channels. So we interact directly with members of the public by operating our vehicles on the Lyft network in Las Vegas. That's been a tremendous learning experience for us as partners. You know, the ride ratings are incredibly good, in excess of 4.95 star ratings, and we get fantastic feedback. There's an initial novelty factor, right, where passengers are really excited to really be experiencing the future of mobility. But I would say even more important is a lot of what we've learned around the importance of interactions for first time riders and really understanding what the car is seeing and how it's perceiving the environment around it, and visualizing for the passenger the path that the car intends to take. This brings a lot of a sense of comfort and security for the passenger. They can see what the car intends to do. We also interact quite a bit with first time riders through some of our own primary research that we work on as we think about what does the in-cabin, experience need to be. We have our safety operators and safety drivers monitoring the vehicles now, and they're incredible ambassadors for this technology. That's really one of our key learnings, is how important the human touch is in this progression. And so we spend a lot of time working on, how do we think about that, as we build more toward the ability to fully remove the safety driver from monitoring the system.
Yeah, actually, that gets me to Gretchen and Grace. I think you guys can touch on this a little bit with your Las Vegas initiatives and stuff. How are you measuring rider feedback to these rides you provide? Is it, I know you're doing the rating system, and Gretchen, like you said, you're using the operators there as a means to communicate, but how are you mostly receiving that feedback, and what does it look like?
Well, we get quite a bit of feedback directly through the app, in the comments fields, and then with some follow-up surveying, and also as they chit chat with our drivers, we collect that information as well. And then, with our partners at Lyft, we really distill that down for key product insights. But I'll point to Grace to see if she's anything to add to that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gretchen. So just a bit personally, why I was so excited to come on today. In my experience, I think understanding human behavior and being able to communicate and educate on how new technologies can create value for people and communities is just so inspiring. And so one of the exciting things about our learnings, which we're collecting both through research, primary research that we do, as well as user feedback kind of through the app, as well as the surveys that they can fill out after the fact, is what we're learning about early adopters. Because with any complex technology, we expect the value will be more clear to a certain subsegment in the beginning, and those folks will be the early adopters most passionate, and over time we expect the benefit to be more clear to more people. So in terms of some of the things that we've learned, we've seen through our research that the majority of Lyft users are somewhat very or extremely interested in self-driving rides compared to the minority of the general public, which basically means that when we have in Las Vegas, for example, when we have Lyft riders calling a self-driving ride, they're more likely than the general public to be excited about getting in one. And that gives us a lot of optimism about the future. We also have a survey that people can fill out after they take a ride, and it's really fun to look through those results. We see results like 94% of riders reporting being somewhat likely to very likely to take another self-driving ride in the future. So they're really enjoying that experience and they want to give it another shot. And the testimonials are inspiring as well. People saying, I felt 100% safe and the operators were very informative and friendly. If I could rate it a 6 out of 5, with 5 being the best experience, I would. One rider even took 16 self-driving rides. And so what we see is in the beginning, there is that novelty effect which Gretchen mentioned. And over time, as we've done more research to dig into what are people looking for from self-driving rides versus a regular ride share, we're actually learning that they're looking for basically the same things. They're looking for cars that are going to arrive, that are clean and sanitary, and that they can get to their destination efficiently. So while right now the experience is really novel and new, we are totally happy with the ride being boring later because it's delivering on all the same same fundamentals that riders are looking for from rideshare.
Yeah, absolutely. David, I want to get back to the event you were talking about that you all partnered with us for. What kind of feedback did you receive from that experience you did? And I'm curious too if there was much of a distinction between the general public audience and the feedback you received there versus the SAE when it was the SAE private event. How did that go?
Yeah. So that part of it was really interesting to see those two groups contrasted with each other. In general, it's probably what everybody in the industry has experienced so far, is that there's so much happiness and excitement for people going through it their first time. It really is. It just creates, there's so much energy and excitement around it. I was actually surprised this far into the development of autonomous. It's been going on for 10 years now, essentially, at this level that so many are involved with, how much excitement there still is. So like on the public side, like I said, all of these time slots, for all 1,200 rides had been filled out ahead of time. So people scheduled this. They came from out of town. We actually had people coming from out of state just to get their 6-minute autonomous ride. There was an older couple. There may have been something written about that. And there was just so much interest in it. And generally what I found was at the beginning of the ride, a lot of questions, a lot of technical questions, safety, when is it going to be available, a lot of the standard things. And then after the ride, it was a lot of taking pictures, smiles, hugging, stuff like this. So there really is this novelty to it and excitement about the technology. So it's, I think it's our industry's opportunity to keep that and not lose that, because there is so much potential for accepting that. But there is also definitely skepticism with it. What surprised me on the automotive side, so like I said, the last 4 days was essentially the auto industry, was we had so many people who waited in line, and they were waiting in line half hour, 45 minutes to get these rides again, 6 minutes. So many of them are engineers, technicians, other business people working on autonomous technology, but they've never ridden in one yet. And in general, the questions at the beginning were similar, but a little bit more technical this time. But then the reaction at the end was kind of the same thing. Everybody taking pictures of each other, laughing. Oh, if my son's going to be so jealous that I got to do this, and a good reaction. So I think the novelty on the first time is really strong, and we saw that a lot. So each of the people who went through this, though, I did want to share, is PAVE and SAE, I think, collaborated on this. Is we did have interviewers set up with stations, and it was part of the whole process. Every single one of those riders went through a post-interview process to gather the data.
That's really neat. So I guess opening this up to all of you all, like, how would you say that when people take these first-time rides, does it affect their view of the technology? Or I know David was just talking about how exciting people are and taking the photos and stuff, but our PAVE polling efforts and things have seen that having these experiences actually fundamentally change the way people view the technology as a whole. And I was curious if you all have seen that at all.
So I'll jump in and share one thing with it is,
Okay.
we also had quite a few government officials come through. We actually had 3 US senators at different time come through. 2 of them, and also 1 congressman representing our region. And a key thing, that same response again, in the beginning, a lot of very official questions, cameras and all that, it was kind of like a media opportunity, but it was just fun to see, we've got some pictures of like Congresswoman Slotkin as she's pulling up after the ride. She just got this look on her face like she's a, teenager just got to drive for the first time or something. So that was really neat, but really good discussion afterwards in terms of, what are the concerns, what are the needs of the community, and one of those that I think is out there that I think we saw that I hadn't seen before was discussions on, how this technology could impact people's jobs. Is this going to eliminate jobs? Well, what are we doing about that? What are the answers there? And the government officials definitely had, those types of questions.
Gretchen, Grace, anything to add on, kind of how these experiences might help build trust among the public, or how your organizations are helping with that?
Sure. I think from the trust building perspective, I think we see as we talked about the response of excitement for the technology, people really understanding, getting just a much better understanding of how, these vehicles will operate, that they're very safe, they're deliberate drivers, they're not, it's a very consistent experience. I think that's, when you get in a car with someone else driving, you never quite know what their driving style is, right? But with an autonomous vehicle, it's very consistent. And so we got a lot of great feedback about that and excitement about that. And I think there's two things. We kind of see the tech junkies who are super excited to dig in and learn more, and they want to go again, and they really want to study what that situational awareness, imagery is telling them, and they want to, talk with us more about it. And then we also have a certain part of the population who is, a little anxious, a little excited and anxious, like both together when the ride starts, and then they realize it's a really, really smooth, safe, uneventful ride, which is what you want a car ride to be. You want it to be uneventful. And very quickly, they're right back on their phone, checking it, checking email, doing their social media, whatever it is they're going to do, and relaxing into the habits that they typically have. And, that's a great outcome, for the two pockets of folks that we tend to get, the kind of tech junkie, super early adopter types, and also the ones who think, oh yeah, this sounds pretty neat, I'll try it out. For them to get comfortable that quickly is really exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace, anything to add?
Yeah, the one thing I would add to build on Gretchen's point is the feedback that we see through this survey just illuminates how a good first experience helps folks really understand it a lot more and just feel more comfortable with it. So we have quotes like, second time taking a self-driving ride, another great experience. When the car was in autonomous mode, we felt safe and sound. We'll continue to use self-driving cars if we have the option. And I also would say personally and anecdotally, I have two kids, 4 and 6, and the more we talk actually about the technology and they see the self-driving cars in our neighborhood driving around, the more approachable the technology feels. And this is not from a specific test we've done at Lyft, but I think there's an aspect around being able to touch and feel the technology and to explain it and to learn about it over time in a way where people can control how they interact with it and feel like they can take more steps or fewer steps based on what they feel comfortable with, I think means a lot.
Yeah, actually, Grace, talking about it with your kids and stuff reminds me, we got a question from the audience where they asked, what differences have you seen in the perceptions of AVs among different age groups? I think people talk about, is there a difference between people 65 and older, but the younger people? And so how have you all seen that perception change as they go through these first time rides?
Well, I would offer that there's almost less distinction between age groups to some degree. And maybe a little bit more about, we've done a couple of programs that I'll touch on quickly. One was with a nonprofit senior community housing center called Second Wind Dreams in Las Vegas. And we purposely wanted to test exactly this question of this, generational feeling toward the technology. And the response from the Second Wind Dreams community was just incredible. The seniors were really energized and enthusiastic about the technology. They saw that it could give them the ability to extend their mobility and, to continue to do the things that they enjoyed doing. They talked about really wanting to share the fact that they've been able to experience this technology with their children and their grandchildren and, have them experience it as well. It was just tremendous. I think we're really excited and heartened to see that. I think sometimes we stereotype on different generational, attitudes and aptitudes towards technologies. And we've actually found, in our experience, when we brought the technology to this group, the reception was really strong. I think when we, one anecdote I'll share where we were doing some research with the visually impaired community, one insight that was really an aha moment for me was one of the gentlemen who's visually impaired told us that what he was so excited for with autonomous technologies was that he could just be in the vehicle without feeling like he had to interact with other passengers. He said, as a visually impaired person, that people want to be very friendly and they want to be really helpful, which is wonderful. But he said, sometimes you just aren't in the mood to chat with other people. And he was really looking forward to the day where he said, just like anybody else, I can go from point A to point B and not have to feel like, if I'm not in the mood, to kind of make small talk and chit chat, then I wouldn't have to. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Just to think about just that freedom of, I just want to get to where I'm going and not have to worry about, some of these other interactions. So that was a learning for me as we think about the different communities the technology can serve.
Yeah, it's really interesting. David, Grace, anything else to add?
So I would share, I share Gretchen's thought, or say, kind of saw the same thing on, it's almost less of an age, and it's, I did see a difference on mobility access. Different groups that have different type of access to mobility, if they're in rural areas or if they have accessibility issues. There was a group there from the National Spinal Foundation or National Spinal Association. I might be getting that wrong.
United Spinal, I think.
Okay, yes, that's it. But they had a group there, and some of the most thoughtful, engaging conversation we had was with a local group representing them. And it was, as far as when it's going to be ready, the typical things, the needs that they would have to be able to, improve their lifestyles. They see it as a great opportunity. So that engagement, they see it as such a strong opportunity to have an impact change on their life that, it's much more acute than for someone who's just like, oh, this will be neat, instead of, my brother driving, I'm driving, or the car's driving itself. So strong interest on that standpoint. So yeah, and I think the technical questions, I was really surprised that you saw that across the whole band. Somebody who would walk up to you who had a non-technical background, maybe they were in hotel management or something like this, and all of a sudden they're going right to the core and asking just the key questions that, some people take a long time to get around to, and it would be amazing. So people are pretty sharp, pretty aware, and I think the trust thing really just has to be real in the end, because people will figure it out on their own. They're, our humans are skeptical, and they'll want to see if it really is trustworthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one point I'll add is that we haven't looked specifically by age, but we look more by use case. So we look at folks who take rideshare versus folks who don't. And so we've seen that folks who take rideshare are more open to self-driving rides.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I want to get to this one because we got a few as people registered on the topic of COVID-19, but people were wondering, how has this pandemic affected your ability to provide rides at your company, and how are you preparing to get back to that work in a safe and healthy way going forward?
Well, we have paused our public rides, and we did that very early, actually. I think with the impact on our industry, and certainly our parent company awareness of really, and I think very early awareness, something that we're all, I think, really appreciating, now here in June. So we paused our rides pretty early, even before some of the shutdowns began, out of an abundance of caution. And we're certainly glad that we took that proactive, that we made that proactive move. We're preparing to get back with public riders. I mean, we think about this has provided a whole new lens, for all of us globally, right, on public health considerations. And so we've looked at how do we ensure safety within the vehicles? How do we think about sanitation, hygiene, cleanliness, and we're building SOPs around all of those areas, partnering with Lyft on what they're seeing work in their core service as well, but also talking to experts in the field of public transportation and the airlines, really canvassing to get best practices and as much knowledge as we can back into the system, and incorporating that into our product planning as well.
So I can share that we're currently contracted. We're currently under a contract with the state of Michigan, North America International Auto Show to provide autonomous shuttles for the auto show between the airport and downtown Detroit. It's a project that Dataspeed's leading, working with Comet Mobility, AM General, Easter Seals, and Michigan State University. And that project is essentially on hold, via the state of Michigan because of the coronavirus. So it's still underway, but it's, both the auto show and, multiple people in the vehicle. There's not a yet. So we're just working with the state to see when that's going to happen. We're thinking it might just get postponed till next year's event, but we essentially have to wait and see.
Nothing to add besides what Gretchen mentioned about the actual rides, but just reflecting more broadly on COVID, on the impact of COVID. I think this time has shown us that COVID impacts us all, and that collaboration and adapting to the evolving situation is really important. Doing what we can to ensure the health safety of riders and passengers and everybody who works at our companies. And as we look forward, a positive note is that I see that this unprecedented time has shown how important AVs can be in the future. We see like the critical need for ride sharing during this time, as essential workers like healthcare workers are taking Lyft rides to get to work, for example. But we also see the importance of some of the things that Lyft is doing to bring AVs to market, things that don't sound exciting or sexy, like fleet management or how we clean and service our cars. But these things are all very top of mind for us, and something we expect to see more of in the coming years. And also being a brand that is trusted by people and that continues to have kind of this social contract to uphold moving forward, to look out for the needs of the riders and the drivers and the community, and work together with the industry to help keep people safe and get them where they want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're sadly getting near the end of the panel, but I wanted to squeeze in one more fun one we got from the audience, where somebody asked, it's related to what David was talking about earlier actually, but how far off do you think the day is when panel discussions like this one, talking about first-time experiences, are obsolete because a lot of people will have had their first-time experience and instead will be having other discussions?
So I'll jump in and say it's one thing that, so I've been working on the autonomous community from an engineering standpoint since the start of this wave, the last 10 years when, it all really got going again when it came out, New York Times, that, Google was working on autonomous cars and everything got going. So immediately that changed the auto industry. And also immediately, if you go back and look, every company made a prediction of when autonomous was going to be here. And every one of them so far has been wrong. So it's such a tough question to throw out there. But I would just share, from my perspective, who we're working with and the other companies that we're working with, that I think we've got a good solid, that question is, when is it going to be normal? Everybody's experienced this. It's not just in a few areas. I think we've got a good 5+ years yet out in front of us before we really just look outside and you see autonomous cars zipping around across the country, not just in nice isolated little sunny areas, but across the country, that it's normal. I think it's 5+ years.
Grace, Gretchen, anything to add, or else we could just wrap up here?
I think the nature of the technology being, is validated for a specific geofence, as Dave was, mentioning, means that this will be, a step function, and it will grow, in certain regions, whether that's, in concentric circles in an area, and then another, set of areas, perhaps in another state. I think that the question, if it's everybody everywhere, you'd answer that one way. But if it's a lot of people in one city, I think that's single digit number of years. So I think that's one of the key fundamental things to understand about the technology, is that it operates in a specific area and has to be tuned, to that road network. And, I think the more that we can, continue to educate on those realities, the easier it starts to be to answer those types of questions.
One I think opportunity that comes out of this time, like some of the challenges I think we've experienced through COVID, is different ways to make progress. So I think there is this shift towards more kind of making progress via simulation as well as on road miles. And I think I don't have a prediction for when. I don't have a prediction for when, but I think there are advances that the industry can continue to make, learning from some of the challenges we've experienced that could help us in the future.
Great. Well, we're out of time, but Grace, Gretchen, David, thank you all again for this wonderful conversation today on these insights. And audience members, thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week. We're going to be talking to journalists on how they cover AVs and news in the AV space. We'll send out information to register later this week and hope to have you all join us again. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.